Disruption of the Grand National as animal rights protesters storm the racecourse at Aintree. More than 100 people have now been arrested. The start of the steeplechase had to be delayed.
The perimeter of the course is 4 to 5 kilometres, so to have a resource, whether it be security or police officers and staff at every point on the course makes it extremely difficult.
We'll have the latest from Aintree. Also tonight, coordinated strike action involving doctors and nurses isn't ruled out, says the Doctors' Union, as its pay dispute continues. So-called smart motorways, no new ones will be built, and many projects currently paused won't go ahead either. And after it was almost destroyed by fire, we see the remarkable restoration of Notre Dame in Paris. Hello, good evening. The Grand National was thrown into disarray this afternoon after animal rights activists got onto the racecourse at Aintree. The start of the world-famous steeplechase was delayed. Merseyside police say a total of 118 people have now been arrested. The race was eventually won by Corach Rambler, ridden by Derek Fox. Patrick Geary reports from Aintree.
The first fence of the Grand National and a battle between police and protesters determined to stop the race from being run. With only 15 minutes until the start of the world's most famous horse race, some activists managed to get onto the track and seemed to attempt to attach themselves to fences. Meanwhile, the 39 horses ready to run were taken back to the pre-paddock area. Police cleared the course, making arrests as part of a wider operation.
We were aware ahead of today that we fully expected a protest, and I think the plan that we put in place was effective, was able to deal with that. I think just to highlight that the perimeter of the course is 4 to 5 kilometres, so to have a resource, whether it be security or police officers and staff at every point on the course makes it extremely difficult.
Animal Rising, the group behind today's action, also held an organised and mainly peaceful protest outside the racecourse. They say they want to protect the horses involved.
Animal Rising is a non-violent group, and no one is going to cause any harm to animals or the public or the police or ourselves. But this is what we are all about. We are trying to safeguard our future.
The race eventually got underway 14 minutes late, and almost immediately a demonstration of some of the risks involved with this sport. There were a number of fallers over the early fences, and one horse, Hill 16, was later confirmed to have died. In the end, it seemed as though Mr. Coffee was cantering to victory, but suddenly a surge from Corach Rambler, with Derek Fox scenting the chance of his second Grand National win, 6 years after his triumph with One for Arthur. A magical finish, but for Fox and Scottish-based trainer Lucinda Russell, who also won her second national, the start hadn't been ideal.
And again, Scotland take the national.
There's enough anticipation as it is without a delay, but and it's the same for the horses really. The thoroughbred horses are just better kept moving and not don't like waiting around as such.
I just say that protesting at the Grand National isn't the way to get their point across. They should come to the yards, see how the horses are kept, understand the welfare that we have in racing, and they've got their view. I think it's crazy to try and disrupt sport like that.
Well, the activists did manage to make their protest about animal welfare, but in the end the Grand National did go ahead, to the delight of thousands here and millions around the world. The 175th running of this race will go down as one of the more eventful. Patrick Geary, BBC News at Aintree Racecourse.
Coordinated strike action involving doctors and nurses isn't being ruled out, according to the union, the British Medical Association, as their pay dispute continues. NHS leaders say the further planned walkouts by nurses in England pose serious risks. The Royal College of Nursing yesterday rejected a 5% pay offer. Simon Jones reports.
Preparing for more picket lines. Members of the Royal College of Nursing will strike again over the May Day bank holiday in England. For the first time, it will involve those working in emergency departments, intensive care units and cancer care. Hospital bosses are concerned.
That will present an unprecedented level of action that we haven't yet seen from nursing staff, and therefore the challenges with that, the organisation and all of the work that will go into managing and mitigating that will be enormous.
The pay deal on the table would have meant a 5% rise for this year, plus a one-off payment for last year. Jessica Collins, a paediatric nurse from Cambridgeshire, voted against the deal.
This just isn't the pay restoration that we asked for. In fact, it's nowhere near. And I think there's a lot of disappointment in the unions for trying to encourage us to accept it.
Clint Cooper, a nurse in Yorkshire, was in favour of the deal.
Absolutely gutted. I understand why my colleagues have rejected it, but I stand by my word. I will not leave my patients.
This morning, junior doctors returned to work after 4 days of strike action. They're asking for a 35% pay rise, and their union hasn't ruled out coordinating strike action with nurses in future.
It's difficult to hypothesise, but all options are very much on the table, and the ball is in Health Secretary's court to prevent any further strike action.
The Royal College of Nursing responded that it's in close contact with the BMA, but insists there is no planned coordinated action. The government says the 5% pay offer made to nurses is fair and generous. It has been accepted by another union, Unison. Ministers say they want the best for patients and staff. Malcolm Matin spent the night in A&E at St Thomas's Hospital in London after falling and breaking a finger.
I don't think they should be allowed to go on strike because it's an important job.
Hospital bosses say the NHS needs a period of stability. Instead, it's facing more disruption. Simon Jones, BBC News.
No new so-called smart motorways are to be built, and 11 schemes currently paused will be scrapped. The roads have been implicated in a number of deaths. Our political correspondent Damien Grammaticus is with me, so tell us more.
Well, these smart motorways, they cover about 10%, 400 miles of the motorway network. The smart ones, you get those digital signs saying slow down, but the most controversial where the hard shoulder has been turned into a permanent lane for moving traffic. Several dozen deaths in recent years on them. What the government did was it had a safety review, paused all building, and today what it's now saying is that 2 projects that are nearly complete will go ahead, but 11, as you say, and 3 more will not now happen. Those lanes will not be converted. The government says this is cost pressures, inflation. It could save about £1 billion, but also recognising a lack of public faith in these. But worth also saying those existing stretches will stay with safety upgrades.
All right, Damien Grammaticus, thank you. Clashes between the army in Sudan and a notorious paramilitary force have left at least 3 civilians dead. Heavy gunfire and explosions rocked the capital Khartoum, where the airport was among sites hit. The clashes have erupted after tensions about a proposed transition to civilian rule. A man has been arrested in Japan after throwing what appeared to be a smoke bomb at the country's prime minister. A 24-year-old man was held after an explosion at a campaign event in the city of Wakayama. The prime minister, Fumio Kishida, was rushed to safety and later resumed election campaigning. Crowds have gathered in Jerusalem for the Holy Fire ceremony, the highlight of Orthodox Easter celebrations. But it comes against a backdrop of Israeli police restrictions at one of Christianity's holiest sites, the Holy Sepulchre Church, and what locals say is a rise in hostility towards Christians. Our Middle East correspondent, Yolande Nell, reports.
A roar of wonder. For Orthodox Christians, this light is an Easter miracle. And quickly it spreads around the Holy Sepulchre Church. There's a crush of foreign pilgrims. But the number of local Christians in Jerusalem is in decline, a minority feeling increasingly under threat. In this old city church, a religious Jewish tourist vandalised a statue, and ultra-Orthodox teens desecrated graves in the Anglican cemetery, breaking crosses. Spitting is a regular occurrence. Often processions are targeted. Church leaders believe extremists have been emboldened by the rise of the Israeli far right.
I don't believe that it is a strategy of the new government to attack churches. But these young people who practice these offences feel in some way protected because they have strong representatives in the government.
There's a lot of tension here today. The tiny Christian community, it's less than 2% of the population, is angry at Israeli police restrictions being imposed on the religious ceremony. The police say for safety reasons. But all of this comes amid Christian complaints that Jewish settlers are taking over more properties around here, and they feel a sense of growing hostility, which many believe is meant to push them away. Chairs were smashed in a recent attack by Jewish extremists on this Armenian-owned restaurant. And a masked youth entered the Armenian quarter with a Jewish group on another night.
One of the youngsters decided to climb the wall to take down the cross-bearing flag of the Armenian Patriarchate. Either the Christian world decides to wake up and defend their Christian brothers who are here, defending the lands where Jesus walked, where is the birthplace of Christianity, or we will lose it all.
Many Christians in Jerusalem are worried about the future. And as the Holy Fire arrives for Orthodox Easter, they're clinging onto it as a symbol of hope. Yolande Nell, BBC News, Jerusalem.
Now, after Notre Dame Cathedral in Paris was nearly destroyed by fire 4 years ago, President Macron's promise to have it rebuilt in 5 years appeared optimistic. But it turns out that the restoration is on track for completion late next year, as Hugh Schofield has been finding out.
4 years ago, the world watched aghast as fire devoured Notre Dame, and the terrible climax, the spire of the cathedral crashing to its destruction. The spire has become a symbol, which at a site in eastern France they've been rebuilding, exactly as the original. Thousands of oaks from ancient forests have been felled and shaped, and now the first part, the massive base, is ready for assembly. Bang on time.
We have said we will do that in 5 years. So our reputation is at stake.
Inside the cathedral, it's still a sci-fi film decor of metal. Scaffolding reaches up to the vast hole which was once the roof. But everywhere, craftsmen and women are at their work of architectural healing. One of the big tasks has been treating the stained glass. Like the spire, these windows are not in fact medieval but 19th century. Unlike the spire, they were saved. Firefighters knew not to spray them with water or they'd have shattered. The disaster for them, ironically, is an opportunity to remove 200 years of dirt.
Donc en fait, on a vraiment l'accumulation.
It's a human grease from the breath of millions of worshippers, plus the soot from the candles and the stains left by condensation. It has all left its mark.
It may still look like an unimaginably complicated task, but in fact the reconstruction of Notre Dame has been advancing much quicker than the doubters ever thought was possible. Just in the last few days, the base of the spire, which we saw being assembled earlier, has been transported here to Paris and hoisted into place. Soon they'll be building upwards, and by the end of the year it's confidently expected that there'll be a new feature on the Paris skyline. Or rather, a very old one, the spire of Notre Dame. Hugh Schofield, BBC News, Paris.
Now, another busy day of sport. Let's get all the details from Lizzie Greenwood-Hughes. Hello.
Thank you, Jane. Good evening. We're starting with football. Highlights follow the news, but here come the headlines for you now. In the other games, Aston Villa beat Newcastle, Tottenham lost at home to Bournemouth, and there were wins for Brighton, Fulham, Crystal Palace and Wolves. Rangers beat St Mirren in the Scottish Premiership, but they're still a long way behind leaders Celtic. It was a 2-2 with 10 minutes to go at Ibrox when Rangers scored a flurry of goals to win it 5-2. The result cuts Celtic's advantage to 9 points. They play tomorrow. Meanwhile, the Edinburgh derby went the way of Hibernian, and there was an important win for Dundee United, who move off the bottom of the table. Manchester United are into the final of the Women's FA Cup for the first time, but they left it very late, beating Brighton 3-2 with an 89th minute goal from Rachel Williams. United will face either Chelsea or Aston Villa in next month's final at Wembley. England are now the outright leaders of the Women's Six Nations rugby after thrashing Wales 59-3 in front of a sellout crowd in Cardiff. Joe Linsky reports.
Six Nations rugby with a sellout crowd in to see it. And in Cardiff, there is hope their team can get closer. England are champions, but Wales now are professionals. And that change in resources has changed their momentum. After 2 wins from 2, they kicked their way here to an early lead. England needed inspiration, so worked the ball to Abby Dow. In this fixture last year, she left the field with a broken leg. Now 5 defenders couldn't stop her for one of the tries of the year. England were in front and now put their foot down. In 15 second-half minutes, they scored 3 more tries. And when yellow cards meant they had 2 fewer players, they still ran in more. 9 came in total from 9 different scorers. This team's now got 31 tries in their first 3 games. Wales are making progress, but England remain ruthless. Joe Linsky, BBC News.
Britain's gymnasts have had another stellar day at the European Championships. Their medal tally is now 6 after Luke Whitehouse won the gold in the men's floor, wowing the judges with a perfect triple back somersault. Becky Downey also took silver in the uneven bars. Ronnie O'Sullivan is on course for a record 8th title at the World Snooker Championship. He's comfortably through to the second round after holding off the talented Chinese qualifier Pang Zhengzhou to win his opening match 10 frames to 7. Well, that's it from me. The rest of the sport is on our website, including the full Grand National results, so you can see where your horse finished. Back to you, Jane.
Thanks, Lizzie. And before we go, a quick word about Laura Koonsberg's programme in the morning.
With nurses saying no to their pay offer from the government, they're heading back to the picket line. So we'll ask their leader, Pat Cullen, the boss of the Royal College of Nurses, how she can explain another wave of industrial action. And we'll hear from the scientist behind the mission to Jupiter's icy moons. For all things domestic and galactic, see you here on BBC One at 9.
But for now, from all of us, that is it for tonight. A very good night.